Welcome back, dear viewers. You're still watching the Breakfast Show live on Nile TV International. It's now time for our first topic of discussion for today. And President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has highlighted Egypt's keenness on boosting cooperation with the international financing organizations, which are a strategic partner in supporting the ambitious plans of the economic development. And to shed more light on this topic, we're most delighted to be joined here in the studio by Dr. Hany Abou-El-Fotouh, and he's an economic expert, to tell us more about this topic and to give us his insight. First of all, good morning, sir. Thanks so much for joining.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Abou-El-Fotouh. And let's first talk about how do you see the fact or observing an act like Kristalina Georgieva, the European candidate for the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, choosing Egypt as her first stop on her foreign tour?
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me here today. I would just like to drop two lines on the background of Kristalina Georgieva. She is a prominent economist. She is a Bulgarian origin, and she has been in office acting as the CEO of the World Bank, and she is expected to take the post of the managing director for the IMF. She has a particular interest in the development issues around the globe, and her first visit or foreign tour to Africa, she started with Egypt because she believes that Egypt has a very important role in Africa to support her nomination to the IMF role as a managing director. She is very keen on the development, on the sustainable development issues, and she believes that Egypt has done a very good success in implementing the economic reform program started 3 years ago, and definitely she believes that the Egyptian experience could be developed further and used alongside the other efforts as strategic partners in Africa.
Doctor, how do you see her keenness on being endorsed by Egypt for this potential role or assuming the post of the IMF director?
As you know, that Egypt has taken presidency of the African Union in year 2019. Egypt has a very powerful status in Africa, and we all know that Egypt is the doorway or the gate of Africa and the doorway of African countries to the world. Egypt has a heavy weight on Africa, and all the 55 member states in the African Union would take it very seriously to benefit from the Egyptian experience. So Egypt, of course, could help in mobilizing the efforts to boost her nomination to the role of the managing director, the IMF managing director, and that's is expected all over.
Talk to us about the measures, or how do you assess the measures taken by the government to be able to improve and prepare the environment of investment for foreign investment and other investments in Egypt?
Egypt has done a lot to reform the legislative and investment climate. Egypt has done a lot of many changes to improve these areas by way of example, introducing a new investment law which provides very good incentives for local and foreign investors. Egypt is focusing on the competitiveness of Egypt as first place for investors to invest in Africa, and thus was noted by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, quoting in a recent report that Egypt, although the slide of the international direct investment globally. Egypt still competitive, the first place in Africa, destination in Africa for investment. So the collective measures to improve the legislative and investment climate, I think, has yielded its results, and it continues, is expected to continue improving in the future.
Doctor, also Kristalina has praised the progress of Egypt towards economic reform and the implementation of the economic reform plan. How do you see her comments?
As rightfully said, she praised the efforts and the success of the reform program, which started 3 years ago, leading to huge improvement in the macroeconomic indicators. Egypt has now been considered as a role model in Africa and even in other countries for achieving higher economic rates, and the Egyptian experience could be exploited elsewhere. I would like also to say that Egypt has expertise through its implementation of the mega infrastructure projects. This is very important in the developed countries, because without proper or adequate infrastructure, no sustainable development could happen.
Egypt, assuming the chairmanship of the African Union, have provided Egypt a very good opportunity to be able to explore different abilities to be able to effect real change inside the continent. So how do you see the future cooperation between the IMF and Africa in particular under the chairmanship of Egypt, the AU? Where do you see Egypt taking the whole continent into a prosperous economic boom?
Egypt has completed the economic reform program over the last 3 years. It has taken very difficult decisions at difficult times. By way of example, rationalizing the subsidies on fuel and electricity, devaluation of the Egyptian pound. All these difficult measures would if not taken, it would have not yielded the same results as we feel today. The IMF and its mission, they are very much keen to improve the sustainable development in the African continent. So if we take an example of Nigeria, Nigeria has started a reform program, but they are still struggling with floating the local currency, unlike Egypt, which has done it at the early stage of the economic program. So the infrastructure in Africa is very important, taking very difficult and sound economic decisions, yet they are difficult. Yes, these decisions are needed. So Egypt can export its experience to the member states of the EU, and they can of course cooperate among each other with knowing that Egypt has taken the matter very seriously, and now after 3 years of the economic reform program, the results and the macroeconomic indicators have improved significantly. All these could benefit the African members of the EU, of the African Union.
Dr. Hany, also speaking about the measures that have been taken, do you think that they paid off or not yet?
Not fully. Not fully. Yes. The macroeconomic indicators have improved significantly, but there are still some areas for improvement. The average person, the average citizen, still have not realized the full benefit of the economic program for many reasons. I mean, it's not only the average citizen would not just look at the economic indicators without having consideration to his day-to-day living standards. So it is expected that some of these benefits could be touch on grounds. Maybe it would take another couple of years until it yields its full results.
In that case, how do you see the keenness of the European candidates for the IMF to consult with Egypt regarding the developing, the financing of the whole continent and the economic development program that could be set for some African countries? The consultation of Egypt was required highly. So how do you assess
Let me
that?
state something very important. There is a huge infrastructure gap in the African continent in terms of financing. And the role of the IMF is to help the African countries to develop or to fill the financing gap of infrastructure in these countries, because without infrastructures, they wouldn't be able to make any sustainable progress. Egypt has taken a brave step in reforming the economy and in building and enhancing the infrastructure in Egypt. So the exchange of ideas, experience and thoughts on these areas are important. One more important issue here also in Africa, and that falls again under the umbrella of IMF, is investing in people and in education, because investing only on infrastructure is not enough. The countries need to invest in good education system, because without education, education is the pillar of any development. So investing in people, in educating people, the quality of education is very much needed to achieve the sustainable development goals.
I believe also the president is fully aware, sir, of what you have kindly noted, and in this regard he has called 2019 the year of education, and many efforts are being done to make progress in this field. Also, on another front, if you can tell us about how can the development in the infrastructure development bring an end to extremism and terrorism and also illegal migration?
You have highlighted a very important issue, is fighting or countering terrorism, extremism. The fuel of terrorism is poverty and unemployment. Okay. If you improve the unemployment in any country, you would gradually feel that there is no room for terrorism or extremism. Take, for example, by way of example, a small, tiny country like Singapore. Okay. Singapore has done a lot over the last 20 years, climbing from or stepping down from the crisis 20 years ago. Now to they are more advanced because they don't have a time or a place for unemployment. They improved the country, the economic status, the unemployment rate, so everybody has a job. I would say the majority. The unemployment rate of unemployment in this tiny place, tiny country, is very minimal. So you can fight terrorism and extremism by improving or providing jobs for the youth, and providing education and investing in people. All this is important, and you cannot do that without having achieved sustainable economic growth.
Right. Let me take it from a very important idea that you raised, or phrase that you just said, which is investing on people. The modern economic reform programs worldwide, any schools of economic reform programs, or even successful experiences that could be fit for any country, is investing on people. And this is what exactly President Abdel-Fattah al-Sisi have also pointed out at building the Egyptian character, investing in education, investing on the awareness of people's cultural awareness and education, and even with the health files and everything. And directing big bulks of the budget towards the educational file. This is what happened today also with the Egyptian government. But do you think that this is going to be the new trend, and then any modern economic reform program, investing on education, investing on people, and could be a condition when it comes to any reform program?
Investing in people and education is a global theme. It's not only in Egypt, but it's all over the world. We see that all developed countries, they have huge budgets for scientific research and for education. And we see these countries are very successful because they invest in people, and the people really, these are the pillars of building in civilization. In Egypt here particularly, the President Sisi has been focusing the attention on the youth, and we've seen 7 or 8 consecutive conferences for young people, meeting with the young people and soliciting the dialogue, the two-way discussion between the state and the young people. All these initiatives will continue to yield its results, because if we don't invest in people now, we will face a very big problem in the future.
Doctor, as we are speaking about the youth and this valuable manpower, do you believe that the government is doing enough effort to engage the youth in the political and economic sphere?
Speaking about the level of the government's efforts, the limit is the sky. There is no limit for that. We expect that the government will continue its efforts to engage young people, because if you don't engage young people, you will be facing huge problems in the future in terms of extremism, in terms of terrorism. So engaging the people, lowering the unemployment rate are pillar to any country to be in a good status.
Right, and as we were talking about imposing a huge, significant change over the continent of Africa, with Egypt assuming the chairmanship of the African Union, the TCAT 7 was taking overwhelming the headlines worldwide in media outlets, with the strong presence of President Abdel Fattah Sisi as Egypt, representing Egypt, and his addressing the attendees. How do you see the impact of the strong presence of Egypt in TCAT 7 over developing with Africa?
TCAT 7 is a platform, a good platform for engaging Africa and Japan and other strategic partners. Egypt, since taking the presidency of the African Union, is speaking on behalf of 55 member countries in the continent. So Egypt understands the problems, the problems in the continents, the development issues, and facilitates the flow of information and discussion on the development issues between the stakeholders, or among the stakeholders. So its presence in the TCAT 7 was prominent, and it has played a very important role in facilitating the discussions on these issues.
As always, Dr. Hany Abou-El-Fotouh, economic expert, we appreciate your insight and your presence on The Breakfast Show.
Pleasure.
Thank you. And dear viewers, now we move on to a short break, and then we'll be back to resume the remaining segments of The Breakfast Show live on Nile TV International.